And we started last week where we looked at some basics of SPSS. And the essence of last week's section was to familiarize us with the user interface of SPSS. But a key takeaway from last week's training has to do with knowing our data. And that has to do with the measurement scale, because as we'll find out today, when it comes to selecting an appropriate statistical analysis, knowing the type of data we have and how it's captured, it's very crucial to the analysis we want to run. Therefore means that how we design our study is very, very important than the analysis. Because even if there's an error in the analysis, we can usually go back and reanalyze. But when you've captured your data wrongly, then it means that you would have to do the study all over again. So last week, we mentioned the fact that we have 4 measurement scales when it comes to quantifying data. And the first one was nominal scale. I think let's quickly browse over that. Yeah. Excuse me, I have a little bit of cold, so just bear with me for today. So we talked about
Hello,
nominal
Dr.
scale.
Phil.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello.
Hello, Phil.
Yes, can you hear me?
Please, can someone hear me?
I
Yes,
can
yes.
hear you, Dr. Kwame.
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Sure.
Can I be heard?
Yes, we
Yes,
can hear
please.
you.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much for coming for today's session also. And since it's 1 minute past time, we want to hand over to Dr. Phil so he can start with us. Okay, thank you
All right.
so much. And Dr. Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Kwame. Yeah, so as I was talking before Dr. Kwame came in, and we're talking about the measurement scales, which we covered last week. I just want to refresh our memories that we have the nominal scale, the ordinal scale, the interval, and the ratio. And we did mention that the nominal scale simply has to do with categories. There is no natural order, such as your gender, your color, your marital status. And we said ordinal has to do with an inherent hierarchy. There is a meaningful order, such as level of education, and very crucial is Likert scale responses, because a lot of time we use this Likert scale, strongly agree, strongly disagree format to collect data. Then the other 2 that are exclusively for quantitative or continuous data are the interval and then the ratio. And we did mention that SPSS thankfully merges the interval and ratio together and then times its scale. So it is very important that we have that in mind. So without wasting much of our time, we'll go to today's lesson. Excuse me. The first thing we want to do today is to import data. Last week, we manually imputed the data using the variable view and then the data view. But today, as we all know that we capture our data in various forms these days, and it is pertinent that we import into our analytics software. I sent a data set earlier, and that would be the data set we are importing. So I want to assume that we all know where we save the data, so that when we launched our SPSS, we're going to access that data. So first thing is know where you've saved the data on your PC so you can have easy access to it. So I'm going to switch over to my SPSS now, and we'll start our training program. So I'm launching the SPSS. It's going to take a bit of time. So please, let's launch our SPSS software. Yep. So after the launching, you have this as we had yesterday. And so you close this. So let's come back to this third name again. Yeah, you close this. Now let's import our Excel file, the Excel file sent earlier today. And for us to do that, we go to File. Then we come down to Import Data. Usually, if you go to Excel, you have access to the Excel file, but I like to use this other way. I choose CSV data. Then when I get here, I change the data type from files of type. Then I change it to all supported data. That way I'm able to access all the files on my PC. Let me do that again. I want to import the Excel file that I sent earlier today. And so for us to do that, we go to File, Import Data. Normally, you can choose this option Excel, which only gives you the option of choosing Excel files. Okay, let's do that first. If I click on this, I can only access this type of file formatting, which is okay. So I can import my data like this. I just click on it. Then I open. When you click open, you wait for a while. You'll see some information. Read variable names from first row of data here, because our data is captured in such a way that the first row captures the variable names. And then you don't need to do much here. All you have to do is usually, if you've downloaded the data from internet, you have some non-printable characters and trailing spaces. So I think it's good practice to just click this so that you trim away any leading spaces from the string values and so on and so forth. But if you're very sure of your data source, you don't need to actually do that. So you just click on OK. So your data is loaded. Please, let's load the data because we're going to be doing a lot with the data set. Now, after loading the data, we need to do some preliminary things to this data. First of all, I don't like this many decimal point. This is the default setting. So for us to remove that, we did that last week. You go to variable view. Remember, we are switching from data view to variable view. You go to variable view. Now, I have this data point with 15 decimal places. So you can just remove it and type 0 and enter it 0 like this. 0. If you have the patience, you can also use the arrow to bring it down gradually. That's if you're so patient, but I just like to type in whatever I want as it makes it easier for me. Yeah, so I think this is also too long, so I can just reduce this if you like. Whatever you want to do, this one is by choice, you know. So now I've removed the decimal points from the data set. That is step 1, importing data using the Excel option. Now, the next thing is I can import the same data. Let me assume I don't want to save this. Okay, let me leave it. Let me import using the other option. File, import. If I click on this, CSV data, you can see I'm only seeing .csv format here. But if I want to access all my data types, I can just go to files of type here. Then I'll just click. Then I'm going to choose all supported data types. Automatically, you can see. Now, normally, you would need to select. Okay, let me do this. Let me assume let's assume I've not opened this data before. I need to search for where I've saved it. So I'm going to go File, Import Data, CSV Data. It's already showing because it's automatic. So you just all supported. Then normally you would have to select where your data is saved. My drive, wherever you've saved it, you look for it. I saved it here. I saved it in SPSS. So you just select from there. So I'm going to select the same data as I did before, so that you have a feel of it again. Now, you have this. So you just click OK, and the same data opens again. Okay. So right now I'm assuming okay. Right now I'm assuming we've all imported our data. So, but before then, some of us, we may need sample data to practice with. So I just want to quickly show us something that SPSS actually comes loaded with a practice sample data that you can use for practice. And if you want to access that, you go to File. Now I want to show you sample data in SPSS for your practice. File, go to Open. Then you click on Data. Now, what I'm looking for is the SPSS sample data. And that means you have to go to the directory where you have installed your SPSS. If you're using a Windows machine, normally you go to Program. I think you go to, I think you have the x86 format there or so. Then you click, then you look for IBM. Now just follow my step. Go to where you've installed your programs if you're using a Windows machine. Select the drive where you've installed your programs. In my case, I'm using a MacBook. So I'm just going to click on volumes. Now I have 2 volumes here. And usually I install programs on this. On MacBook, I'm going to have applications. So you click on applications. Then I'm looking for IBM. That is the SPSS package, IBM. You click on it. You see SPSS, you open it. You see statistics, you open it. Depending on the version of SPSS you have, you're going to see this number. Mine is version 26, so I open this. Now, inside this SPSS folder, you look for samples. If you click on samples, you'll see different languages. In this case, you choose English, and you can see a host of practice data. A lot of data sets you can actually use to learn how to use SPSS. So I just want to show us this quickly in case you're looking for some data set for personal usage and practice, so you can quickly do this. So I'm not going to open this now because I don't need it, but just have it in mind that you have a lot of data set to practice with in SPSS, so you can explore that later. So I'm going to close this. Now we want to do some things. I'm switching over to my PPT. We've imported the data, and I've actually shown us how we can access the sample data files in SPSS. We want to do some things with our data. The first thing we want to do is data transformation. We want to compute data. Now, take a look at this data set. Oh, sorry. Here's my SPSS. Okay. Now, this data set is looking at income, debt, and credit debt, and other debt that the respondents are owing. Now, imagine that I've captured this data this way, credit debt and then other debts. But I want to see what is the average. I want a data set that actually averages these 2 forms of debt, you know? No, I've collected my data already. What do? The first thing I can do is to use the compute option in SPSS. So let's do that. For us to do that, go to transform. Click on compute variable. Now, I want average debt. Remember, you can't space the naming of your variable. Average debt. How do I want it to be? I want it to be the average, okay, the mean of these 2 debts. The first one is credit debt. So I just click on it, move it in, put a comma, then the other debt. Click on it, move it in, close it. What we are trying to do is we are trying to compute another variable from existing variable using SPSS. And from the sample data, we want to have a hypothetical average depth, given that we have two forms of depth that has been captured in the data set. So the logical thing to do is to find the mean. And how do we do that? Mean, open bracket, then you move the two variables in and you close. If I click on OK, you would see something like this. Okay, let me open this. You will see output window telling you you've done this. That is not relevant. I don't want to save this. But when you go back to your data, you should see something like average. Where is it? You didn't capture it.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, hello.
Please, could you kindly slow down because you're too fast?
I don't think I'm fast. Okay, but I'll try to slow down.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot to cover, and we cover most of this. Okay, let's do that again. Let's do that again. But you have to move fast because we can't be too slow. We only have 2 hours and with a lot to cover, So what we are trying to do is we are trying to compute a new variable. And that new, I'm coming. I think I opened 2 data sets, so it should reflect on one. Coming. Let's compute it again. I can't find the output here. Let's do it again. So we go to transform. I'm on this data set, this very data set. We go to transform, compute variables. Now, on this target variable, what you have to do is you put the name of the new variable you're trying to create. In this case, I want to create average of depth. I'm going over again, so please, the person who said I'm too fast, kindly bear with us, okay? So now I want the average of this. And for me to do that, I can just use the mean function. Mean, that's average, open bracket. I want to move this to credit depth, comma, other depth, enter it, close the bracket. Then you click on OK. Why is it not responding? Come here. Something is wrong with my screen. Please let me relaunch my SPSS. I don't know what's going on. It seems not to be responding to commands. The screen is frozen. Please let me relaunch. Give me a few seconds. I don't know. Let me close it and relaunch this. Quit. Why? It's not even quitting. Oh. Let me use the force quit option. Hold on a second. My SPSS is not responding. Let me relaunch it and SPSS. It's not here. I think it's closed now. Can't even find it in this SPSS. Force quit. This is it. Let me force quit this again. Okay, now let me relaunch my SPSS. I don't know why it wasn't responding. Let me relaunch it again and see. Okay. I want to quickly import the data again. Import data. Here's the data set. Okay. Okay, so I'm hearing my data. So I want to go over that again. I don't know why the system wasn't responding. So let me quickly do that again. I want to reduce the decimals. 0, 0. Okay. So now earlier I was talking about computing a new variable. So we go to the transform option, then click on compute. Then I said you name it average AVG depth. Then I want to have mean. Then I can move in the 2. On the first one, put a comma. On the second one, put a comma. Close it. Okay. So with these, I should have, yeah, now it's done. So now you can see, if you check your variable view, you'll see that the 10th row is named average depth. That is the mean of the 2 that we've just computed using the transform option. So let's go back to data view. When you go back to data view, you'll see that there is another variable added. And that's the last one, AVG depth. So that's how you can use SPSS to compute a new variable. And that's what we call the compute option in SPSS. If you want to create a new variable, and it has to be logical anyway. You can't just add mangoes and tomato together and claim you're computing a new variable. So yeah, so that's how it works. Now, the next thing we want to consider is, so we've done the compute option. The next thing we want to do is recoding variables. Now, to recode simply means to categorize a variable, Probably you want to use, you've captured your data in such a way that you ask people to indicate their actual ages. But in your analysis, you want to use these actual ages as a group. You want to create age groups. How do you do that? That is the next focus of our training. We want to recode a variable. So I'm going back to the SPSS interface. Now, let's look at the variable age. That's the second column, age. We can see here that what we have here is actually a continuous data set with actual ages of the respondent. But it is only logical that we want to put our age into categories, age groups. But while capturing the data, you didn't do that. So how are you going to do that? Now, the first thing you need to do is, how do you want to categorize your age? How do you want to categorize it? So you need to have a definite idea in mind about how you want to categorize the age data that you have. In this data set, we have about almost 900 respondents. So it will be very difficult for me to start going through one after the other to find out which one is the highest, which one is the lowest. So you can just click in the age column, right click. When you click and just right click, you see a window that pops up with copy this, that. Now click on descriptive statistics. Now, if you click on descriptive statistics, for that age variable, you can see we have the minimum age is 20 and then the maximum is 56. So I have minimum age in my data set is 20 and then the maximum is 56. Now I want to convert this into age groups. What do I do? Very easy. Go to transform. Now, when you come down to recode, we have two recodes here. One is into same variables And then the second one is into different variables. For now, we are going to do into different variables, and after that, I'll demonstrate what it means to recode into the same variables. So please click on recode into different variables. When you click this, you see this window. Which variable do I want to recode? I want to recode my age variable. What is a new name? The output name, that is a new name. I want it to be age group. Age groups. Of course, the label can be age grouping, whatever you want. The label is just a description of whatever it is. Age group, whatever you like. You can leave it blank if you don't want. Age group of respondent. Like this. Then you click on change. After that, come down here, you see old and new values. Old and new values. Click on old and new values. Another window pops up. Now we have value, we have blah, 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 we have range. Now, what I want to do is I want to create an age grouping in which the respondent ages falls within a specified range. So I'm going to click here. Remember, the minimum age in my data set is what? 20. So I want to indicate that by coming down here by saying range, lowest true value. If I click on this and I say 20, because that's my lowest, it means the first grouping will be all the respondents who are between 20 years and below. So I'm going to call those people 1. Please let me do that again. Remember, we checked that the minimum age in my data set was 20. It is conventional that when we are capturing data, we say below 18, below 20, below this. So I want to capture my first age grouping to be respondents who are below 20 years. So that means anyone who is 20 and below falls under age group 1. Then I'm going to click add. The second one. Now, for me to capture the other one, I have to go to range. Remember, the age grouping is something you have to predetermine. So we are just doing this as demonstration. So now, since I've already captured those who are 20 and below, I want to move from 21 to, let me say, 35. Then I'm going to call those people age group 2. Then after that, I want to capture those who are 36 to 45 years. I want to call those people age group 3. Then I want to capture those who are, let me say, 46 to 55 years. I want to call them age group number 4. Now, and the rest. So I want that to be anything 56 and above. So for me to do that, you come down to the same way we selected lowest true value for those who are 20 and below. If you want to capture for those who are 56 and above, all you have to do is come down, click on range, value true highest. Now I want 56 and above, so I'm just going to put 56 and 5. When I add it, I have this. After making sure that your age groupings are adequately covered, please pay attention. It is not a good practice for you to group your data in such a way that you see some people, they'll have, let me say, lowest true 20. Then the next one will be 20 to 35. Then the next one will be 35 to 45. Make sure that they are categories, they are not overlapping, so that you have distinct groups. You won't have a particular respondent falling into more than one group categorization. That's very important. So after doing this, all I have to do is to click on continue. When you click on continue, then just click on OK. Then the output window comes up. and then a new variable is added to your data set. You can see the last column, you can see age groups. See? So what you've done is that you've transformed this age variable, which was captured as a continuous data, into groupings. So now you can see, I have it here. So if I should check on my, what's it called? If I check my variable view, you see, age groups, it's been added here. So that's one way to reclassify your data set in SPSS. Now, what we have done here is to recode into different variables. Now you can see we still have our original data set named age, and we have the new one. Now let's do the other one and see what's going to happen using the employment. This employment means years of employment. So let's go back to transform. Let's recode into same variables. Remember, it's the same procedure. Transform, recode into same variables. Now I want to demonstrate that with the employed data. This employment variable simply means the number of years employed. So if I move this variable into this box, there's a mistake here. I don't even know the highest or the lowest in this data set, so I can't even classify it properly. So let's click on it and let's quickly have a descriptive of this variable. So if you click inside that variable, descriptive statistics, here's the output. Whenever I'm on Zoom, my displays are not the conventional ones. Okay, so you can see this is the employment variable. So what I want to pick here is the largest and the smallest. So the minimum is 0, and then the largest is, that means we have somebody who has worked for as high as 33 years and somebody who has worked for 0 years. So you need to know the minimum and the highest in order for your classifications to be done properly. So now that I know, I can go back and classify this years of employment. So I can go to analyze, transform, recode into same variable, move the employment variable, go to old and new values. Remember, the lowest is 0 and the highest is 33. I want to reclassify this into 6 groups. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Or let's do it like this. Let's classify it into 5 groups. So we have first one. Let's say those who have worked for less than 5 years, 5 years and below, we can call it 1. So that's for those who worked for 5 years and below. Then the next one is range. Those who worked from 6 years to 10 years, I want to call them group 2. Then those who work from 11 years to 15 years. 15 years, let's call that, that'll make it too much. Let's make it 11 to 20. Let's call it group 3. Then let's say those who worked from 21 years to, let me say, we're just grouping 30 years, let's say group 4. Now I want highest true. I want those who worked for 31 years and above to be group 5. Then I'm just going to add it. So you click on it, continue. Now you can see that because we are recoding into the same variable, the initial option where we were asked to put the name of the target variable and then the variable label is not there. Now let's see what's going to happen. If I click on OK, if I close this, now take a look at your employee variable. You can see that the original data has been replaced with the coding. So we no longer have the years, we now have the categorization. So what is the takeaway here? If you want to retain your original data, please use recode into different variables. But if you want to replace the data set, use what? Recode into same variables. I think that is clear enough. Okay, so we have covered compute, and we have covered recoding into different variables and recoding into the same variable. Now, another interesting thing we can do while managing data in SPSS is using what we call the grouping or the splitting option. Now, imagine that I have this data set and I want to split this into gender and then income. We did something similar last week when we're using the compare means analysis, but this is pre-analysis. We are managing our data before the analysis. Now, we are going to do something. We have 1, 2 on our gender column. Let's do this. Go to data. Go down. You'll see split file. The third to the last indicator there, split file. Click on it. I'm going to show you something. Now, click on the second option, compare groups. I want to move my gender variable. We can do that for any other categorization. I want to move my gender variable. Click on OK. When you click on OK, don't expect anything to happen. Nothing is going to happen to your data set. What happened here is that you can see your data has been sorted. It's been sorted, but that's not even important. What I want you to see is something. Let's analyze this data. Descriptives, frequencies. Let's say I want gender. Okay. Now look at something. Look at this output. Do you think this is a good output? I need a response, please. I have performed a descriptive analysis on my gender. I'm having 1, 2. Frequency tables are not produced for the following way because they are. Now, who can tell me what is the problem? Given that you've imported your data, what is the problem? I need a suggestion, please. What is the problem? We can't even see which one is male. We can't see which one is female. If you have this kind of situation, how are you going to remedy it? Response, please. Why? Why am I not seeing male? Why am I not seeing female? Why am I just seeing gender 1, 2?
Because you've already split the data.
I've done what? Hello, please, can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, because you have renamed the data. Maybe male represents 1, female represents.
Thank you very much. That's a very good insight. I need more. That's a very good insight, Doc. Thanks.
As you have split the data.
Hello. Please, someone is talking at the background. Kindly mute yourself, please.
Because
for me, I think
because
like
you have made data for the gender
subgroup of gender. So within each subgroup, it's being treated as an independent sample.
Okay, that's also a very good insight. Thank you very much. You are all right in one way or the other. Now, let's take a look at our data. Why I'm not able to see, because it is very confusing if you present your report and you tell someone you're analyzing gender, that you're showing us the number of males or females in your where is that again? In your data set, and then you have 1 and 2. The thing is that in the coding, remember, gender is a categorical variable. 1 could be female, 2 could be male, and male could be 2, and vice versa. So it's not really communicating. You're not there to tell the person reading your report that, okay, one is gender, one is male, or two is that. Now, the reason that happened was because when we imported the data, please go back to your variable view. On your variable view, you can see that when you go to the values, we captured this last week. When you go to the values, we did not code our gender variable. And that was because we imported the data from an Excel file. So whenever you import data, please pay attention to make sure that all your value labels and categories are sorted. Don't just go straight to the analysis. Look at the parameter settings here to ensure that everything is accurate. So because we imported the data and we didn't assign value labels to it, that is why we have that. So let's do that again. Now let's call one male and see what's going to happen. Let's call two females. Okay. Now let's do that. Now let's go back to the data set. Now I have my gender variable here. You can see now I have male. If you want to toggle between what is showing, you can just use this arrow here. If I click on it, you can see one. If I click on it, you can see. So now I've assigned value label to my data set. Now let's go back to the analysis again. Analyze, descriptives, frequencies. Now the same gender variable is there. Now let's see what's going to happen. Now, can we see a difference? Okay, let's analyze this again, please. I want to show more output. Analyze, descriptives, frequencies. I want to have okay, I want to have more options. Just min doesn't mean anything for this, but I just want to show us something, you know. So if you click on that, okay. Now you can see that in the output, you can clearly see male and female, males and females. So the first time we had that as spurious output because we didn't group our data accordingly. So please, let's pay attention to that whenever we are running analysis, so we don't end up presenting a result that is not readable. Okay, that's that. We've covered that. So let's also try splitting the data set by the new age groups that we formed. So let's go to data, split file. Now okay, let's leave this one there. Let's add age group, which is the last variable. Age grouping, let's add it. Click on OK. Nothing is going to happen. But when you run analysis, let's go, descriptives. Let's say descriptives, gender, move gender. No. Let's say I want to run a descriptive on income. I want to run a descriptive on this. Look at what's going to happen to the output. Just watch. Remember, when I was analyzing, I didn't choose any demographic variable. Let me do that again. Analyze, descriptives. I want to analyze income and debt. I didn't move any age or gender or any demographic variable. But when I clicked on OK, my output has been grouped into different groupings. The question is why? You can see male, female, male, female. I'm not having the overall statistics. It's been categorized. That is because we splitted the data file initially. If you don't want that to happen, if you don't want to see subgroupings in your analysis, you have to turn off the split file option. So if I click on split file again, then I'll click here because you've already said compare groups. So any analysis you're running is going to be splitted into the different groups that you've selected here. But if I don't want to see the subgroupings of my analytic output, I'm just going to switch this off. So if you click do not create groups, the first option there, and you click on OK, let's reanalyze the data set again. I don't want to save this. Let's reanalyze, analyze, descriptives. If you click on that again, same variables, nothing changes. Let's analyze and see. Look at your output. Can you see that the output is aggregated? You're having data samples, the mean, the standard deviation, and the data is not splitted into different subgroups. So when you use this split file option, if you don't turn it off, any analysis you're running would be splitted. So please always have that in mind. That's that on the split file option. The next thing, I think we've covered all the basic elements here. Yeah, we've computed, we've transformed, we've recoded, and now we've used the split file option to explore our data set. We still have time, so we can go straight to the other portion. I was thinking this would take an hour, but it didn't take. So let's go to analysis now. Last week, we covered a host of descriptive statistics, and we are not going to use spend our time trying to do that again today. Today, we are looking at inferential statistics. Now, there is a difference between descriptive statistics and then inferential statistics. Descriptives is simply exploring the data. You want to see the type of data you have, and you can't generalize the findings on a population based on descriptives. Now, if you want to generalize your findings on the population of study, then you have to use what we call inferential statistics. Now, what these analytic techniques do is that they give you the basis on which you can draw inferences. You can generalize on the population of study. Now, generally, inferential statistics are grouped into two. They will call the parametric analysis or parametric test, and then the non-parametric test. For every parametric test, there is a corresponding non-parametric analysis. Now, parametric simply means that, one, your data has to be continuous or quantitative. It has a parametric test, which has to do with C, that's equality of variances, and so on and so forth. That is why the first assumption is your data normal? If it's not normal, what can you do? Most times that people give a report and then they say they've done analysis of variance, they've done this, they've done that. The first question you ask yourself before you run an analysis is, does your data meet the requirement for this particular analysis I'm running? If the data is quantitative and it doesn't satisfy it, any parametric analysis you're running is beautiful nonsense. You're going to have beautiful, fanciful outputs, significant or whatever, but the data has not satisfied the basic assumptions for a parametric analysis. So it's beautiful, good output, but it is beautiful nonsense. So we're going to dive into the world of parametric analysis, and then we'll look at instances where our data does not satisfy the conditions for parametric analysis. What other corresponding non-parametric analysis can we look at? How to choose the appropriate test. As a non-technical analyst is know your type of data. What do you want to find out? If you can convincingly answer those two questions, then you don't have a problem when it comes to using SPSS. Your type of data and the aim of your research. What do you have a feasible objective? The first thing you consider before choosing a test is type of data. Is it continuous? What I mean continuous, is it quantitative? If it's quantitative, then we measure it on the ratio or interval scale. Now, if you answer that convincingly that your data is continuous, then great. You look at the options on the left-hand side here. Now, if your data is continuous, what are you looking for? What is your objective? Are you looking for relationships, or are you looking for differences between groups? If you're looking for relationships, maybe this and this are related, income and education. If you're convinced that you're looking for relationships, the next question is, do you have a true independent variable? Do you have an independent variable that is being predicted by the dependent variables? Do you have independent variables that predict the dependent variables? If yes, then regression analysis is your appropriate test. And remember, under regression analysis, you can have your simple regression and you can have your multiple regression analysis. So if you have more than one independent variable, you run what? Multiple regression. But if you have only a single independent variable, you run what? A simple linear regression. Now, last week, someone asked me a question, and I did mention that correlation does not mean causality. Now, that is where this comes in. If you don't have a true relationship, if you run regression analysis and you have a significant output, what you're having is what we call spurious correlation. If there's no true relationship between them, it's like you saying, let me give an example. Let's say the number of let's say there's a positive correlation between the GDP of China and, let me say, Ghana. Is that true? Could it be true? Is there a true relationship? Are the economies the same? So if you're running that regression based on saying, okay, Ghana's economy is predicted by Chinese economy, is that reasonable? Is that a true relationship? So you need to ask yourself before you run a regression analysis, these two variables, these multiple independent variables, do they really have a true relationship with the dependent variable? I'm emphasizing on this because you see so many funny regression analysis in reports. So please make sure you have a true relationship. Now, the next one is, if there is no true relationship, you're very convinced there's no true relationship, then you go to correlation analysis. Excuse me. Sorry. If there's no true relationship, then you go to correlation analysis. And last week, I mentioned the difference between Pearson's correlation analysis and Spearman rank correlation analysis, which is a non-parametric counterpart of Pearson's coefficient. So have that in mind. Now let's explore the right-hand side of this flowchart. If your data type is discrete or categorical, then you can run a chi-square test, which helps you to test for dependencies. I mean, does this depend on these, and so on and so forth. Now, under the continuous type, we have not finished. If you are not looking for relationships, but you're looking for differences, is there a difference between what males are saying and what females are saying? Is there a difference in age group? So when it comes to your response variable, take for instance, if I have income level, as we have in this data set, and I want to find out, is there a difference between the income levels of males and females in my data set? What about educational levels? is there a significant difference in the average income levels of the various age groupings in my data set? So if I'm looking for differences, then I look at this option. What test can I run? I can run a lot of tests. I can, such as your t-test, your one sample t-test, and so on and so forth. But I'm going to stop here for now before we continue on this. Let's demonstrate some things. Let's go back to our SPSS. Imagine that I have this data set. Variable view. I'm going to remove this zeros. Imagine that I have this data set and I have income. You know, there's always this argument for gender equality when it comes to income levels. There's always this argument that males earn higher than females. So I want to check that. Is it true in my data set? Or we can also argue this way. You know, there's always this saying that, oh, if you go to this country, the average salary for, let me say, a bank employee is, let's say, $50,000 per annum. This is an assertion. This is a hypothesis. Oh, if you go to this country, let's say China, the average annual salary for someone who is in the financial sector is $50,000. That's my hypothesis. And now I'm in China. I've collected this data. And this data is from about 850 employees in the banking sector. This is hypothetical scenario I'm creating. So I want to ask myself, I want to test the assertion that on average, everyone who is employed in the banking sector in China earns at least $50,000 per annum. How do I do that? Given that I have this income data here. That is what we call one sample t-test. How do you test that? Go to analyze. Come down to compare means. Choose the second option, one sample t-test. Now, I want to check. Oh, why did I even enlarge it? Okay, let me just lift it up. I want to test if truly the average income of all banking sector employees is about $50,000. Now, that test value is my hypothesized value. That's the asserted value, the status quo, the generally believed assumption that, oh, if you work in the banking sector, at least you get $50,000 per annum. Is that true? Now, so that 50,000, which is 50, is now my test value. So what I'm trying to do now is that I want to test that on average, does my data measure up to the assertion? So all I have to do is to click on OK. SPSS is so easy. So you see, normally you would have descriptive statistics, the standard deviation, the mean. We have income, and then, okay, now this is what you want to look at. This is the t-test for income. Look at the significance value. You can see that at the 0.05 level, our p-value is less than 0.05. It therefore means that truly there's a significant difference between our hypothesized test value, which is $50,000, and what we have in our sample. It means it's not true. Our data set does not satisfy this assumption. because the null hypothesis for one sample t-test is usually stated as the sample mean. I think I stated it here. Let me look at it. The sample mean here. Here. I think I'll be here. Yeah. Yeah. Usually stated as there is no significant difference between the sample mean and the test value. So this is what we are testing for. When you're conducting a one sample t-test, you're hypothesizing that there is no significant difference between the sample mean, which is the mean income from our data, and then the status quo, which is the $50,000. But when you look at the result, you'll see that our p-value is actually less than 0. We have a significant result, meaning that we reject the null hypothesis and conclude that actually the mean income level is statistically different from the test statistics of 50. Now, you ask yourself, is it lower or higher? We'll answer that when we start looking at effect size. I don't want us to overflock them, but just know that in this case, our value is not the same as what is hypothesized. The next thing we can do is we can compare two groups. Imagine that we want to compare the incomes of males and females in the data set. That is what we call independent sample t-test. I want to check that, is there a significant difference? Remember the word is significant difference between the mean income of males and females in my data set. So if I go here, using the same income variable, analyze, compare means. This time around, you choose independent samples. What is my test variable? My test variable is income. What is my grouping variable? Gender. I want to see. Now, I need to define my groups. Remember, I have two groups, 1 and 2. I continue, and just click on OK. When you click on OK, automatically you have your output. So this is the output for the independent samples test. Now you can see, before you even look at the significance of your output, you can see there's something there. Levens test for equality of variances. Remember, an independent samples t-test is a parametric analysis. And all parametric analyses require the normality of your data set. 1, homogeneity of variances. Homogeneity of variances simply means equality of variances. Others will call it homoscedasticity. So when you're running a parametric test, you have to check first, is my data normal? Do I have normality? You can usually check with your histogram and put the bear curve and see if it's actually normally distributed. Then you check for the equality of variances or homogeneity of variances. Luckily for us, SPSS comes out with this Levens output, which tests for the equality of variances. Please, when you're testing for the equality of variances, the interpretation is the other way around. If your significant value, which you can see as this is 0.54, if it is less than, please, this is very important. If it is less than 0.05, it means you don't have equal variances. Please, don't interpret it the same way you interpret your significant output. When you say, oh, less than 0.05, therefore, no, If your 11th test of equality of variances has a p-value that is less than 0.05, it means that your data is not having equal variances. So the assumption of homogeneity of variances has been violated. And when it's violated, then you cannot use a parametric test. That is why in this output, you can see we have income, equal variances assumed, and equal variances not assumed. But because our significant value here is greater than 0.05, it means our data set satisfies the assumption of homogeneity of variance. Please keep that in mind. So the first thing you check is this. If your 11th test has a significant value, a value that is greater than 0.05, it means you've satisfied the assumption for homogeneity of variances. And then it means you can proceed with your what? Independent sample t-test. Yes. Hello. Please let me finish the explanation. When you look at this, we have here our significant t value here is greater than 0.05. So you interpret the test output based on the conventional less than 0.05 convention. So now we can see that what? 0.845 is greater than what? 0.05. Therefore, there is no significant difference in the mean income of males and females in our data set. And you can see that from the descriptives. Look at the descriptives. Look at the mean. For males, we have 46.36. For females, we have 46.89. We can't say there is any big difference here. So even the descriptives gives us an idea that we don't expect to have a significant independent sample test output, given that descriptive statistics shows that it's very, very close. Somebody was trying to ask a question. You can ask them. Go on a break, please. Hello? Okay, if there is no question, we'll take a 10-minute break, then we'll come back and we'll continue.
proveniente fazer certos tipos de investimentos nesse momento. Por isso, você pode falar
I think it's about time. So we are welcome back from our water break, and let's continue. Always remember this. The design of a study is more important than the analysis. Always remember that. Most times, people are so concerned about the analysis, but they forget to make sure that they collect the appropriate data. You can always get outputs when you have the right data. But when you've collected the wrong data, you've measured the variables wrongly, a variable that you're supposed to measure as continuous scale, you're measuring it as a dichotomous yes or no variable, then you've limited your chances of success. So always focus on the design of your study. When it comes to the analysis, with the right design, you can always get a good analysis. Always remember that. So we're talking about independent samples t-test. And I did talk about Levin's test of equality of variances, and I explained the fact that when this value is greater than 0.05, it means you have what we call homogeneity or equality of variances. And if it is less, it means your data has not satisfied the assumption for a parametric analysis. Now, let's ask a question. Let's assume that this very data set, it's an assumption. Let's assume that this data has not satisfied the necessary conditions for a parametric analysis. In that case, I'm assuming that the significant value under the Levin's test here is less than 0.05. In that case, what do you do? For every parametric test, there is a corresponding non-parametric test. So if your data set violates the assumption of normality and homogeneity of variances, don't worry, don't insist you must run this test. Run the non-parametric counterpart of it. Let's do the same test again. Let's go to analyze. But in this case, we go to non-parametric test. Remember, we are trying to replicate the non-parametric version of independent samples t-test. So you go to analyze, non-parametric test, go to legacy options, then choose two independent samples. So let's use the Mann-Whitney U-test. So this is also a test that compares two groups, but in this case, our data set is not normal. So I move the income data as my test variable. I move my gender as my grouping variable. Then group one and group two, continue. When you click on it, you also get a result. You can see that the two results are similar.
Can you please repeat that again?
Running the test.
Yeah, what you just did.
Okay. Analyze. Come down to non-parametric test. Go to legacy dialogues. Come to two independent samples. Remember, we are doing two independent samples. So now, because of this non-parametric one, we choose two independent samples. Click on it. Now you just move the test variable, the income, and the grouping variable, which is gender, which I defined the group initially. In our data set, we said 1 and what? 2. So you say continue. If you click it, okay, then you get the output here. I already have this, so I'm not going to repeat that. Can you see it? Now, if you have this output, let's compare to the independent samples t-test. Look at the significant value here, 0.241. Compared here, 0.845. You can see that in both instances, the result is not significant. That means that the non-parametric test also give me what? Good and dependable valid outcomes, So you don't have to insist that you must run a particular test when your data set is not suitable for that. So if someone has reported an independent sample t-test for a data set that does not satisfy the assumptions of normality, even though your test is okay, the result may be okay, but you've applied the wrong test because your data does not satisfy the assumption. So don't always insist you must do this test. Look for the non-parametric version of it if your data set does not satisfy the assumptions of normality and other necessary conditions. So that's just what I'm trying to bring in here. Now, the question now is, we've been comparing two groups, male and female. What if I want to compare more than two groups? More than two groups. What do you do? Now, one thing you should understand that, people like ANOVA a lot. Analysis of variance is simply an extended version of independent sample t-test. In that, independent sample t-test compares only two groups. But when you have more than two groups and you want to find if there is a significant difference between these groups and your data satisfies the conditions for normality and other parametric assumptions, then we run analysis of variance. It is analysis of variance when your dependent variable is 1. But when you have more than one dependent variable, then it becomes MANOVA, multivariate analysis of variance. So we're going to demonstrate that now. Let's look at our data and see if we can find a suitable grouping variable. Let's look at the data set. Okay. Let's assume, how many levels of education do I have here? I think we have 4 levels of education. 4 levels of education. Is it coded? No. Let's look at variable. Education. Okay. Now let's code this edu variable. Let's come to values here. Let's say 1 is for those with high school. Then let's code 2 for, let's say, BSc degree. Let's say 3 for, let's say, MSc. Let's say 4 for PhD. Then we add. So I've grouped my education variable. Now, our objective is, we want to see, is there a significant difference in the average income of our respondent across different levels of education? That means we want to see, in this economy, in this population, where the data has been taken from, is there a statistically significant difference in the average income based on their levels of education? Now, in this case, we can see that we have more than 2 categories. We have 4: high school, BSc, Masters, and PhD. So when you want to compare more than 2 categories, you use analysis of variance. If your data satisfies the necessary conditions for a parametric test. But if it doesn't, we'll do that after this ANOVA test. So the same thing, go to analyze, go to compare means, go to one-way ANOVA. One way because you have one dependent variable, which is your income. Click on it. So the dependent list here is my income. Now, my factor, what are my factors? I want to group it by what? Education. So I move education there. Now, click on contrast. No, let's leave that, please. Click on post hoc. Now, usually, post hoc is performed when you have established a statistically significant difference. So when you run the ANOVA and there is a difference, then you want to see which pairs of levels or groupings differ statistically. So we're going to do this twice. Let's not click anything here. Let's just run the analysis. Let's run it. Now, when you run the analysis of variance test, you can see that my test here is significant. Now that is significant, meaning there's a statistically significant difference across the levels of education when it comes to their average income. I want to ask myself, which ones differ from which ones? I'm particularly interested in masters and PhD. Is there a difference, statistically significant difference in their income levels? So you go to analyze again, you go to compare means, one way and over. Now you click on post hoc. So normally some people just run it straight, but I just demonstrated that for you to see that you only need the post hoc analysis when there is actually a difference. So if I click Fisher's LSD, yeah, let's use that one. Fisher's LSD test. Let's run the analysis and see the output. So you can see, one, we have established that there is a statistically significant difference in the income levels across the different educational levels. Now here, the post hoc test simply tells us which levels differ from which level. Now, let's compare high school respondents. If you compare those in high school to BSc holders, you look at the significant difference. The test is significant, less than 0.05. If you compare high school to those with MSc, you can see the test is significant. Very, very significant, 0.00. If you compare high school to those with PhD, you see the test is very significant. Now, this 5 here shows that we have error in our coding, you know? Excuse me. So this 5 here simply means that we didn't code our data correctly. So when we're naming the data labels, we didn't capture 5. So we have to go back. That means our analysis is wrong. So we go back to the data. If you encounter something like this, you have to go back to your data set. I don't want to. Now you can see when we look at the data view under education, I have a 5. The best way to confirm that is run descriptives. If you run descriptives, you can see the maximum is 5. But in my coding, I stopped at 4. So the 5th one was not captured. So let's now assume that we recode this. I come back to my data set variable view. I go back to my values. I want to add a 5th category, 5. Let's say professorship. Let's just assume it's professors, you know? Let's assume. So if I add this and I click OK, I've rectified that situation. So now let's run the analysis again. Compare means one way and over. I think my variables are still there to correct it. So LSD, if I continue, I click OK. Yep. Now you can see that the 5 is no longer there. So sometimes during your data management and cleansing, you could have an error and then you run the analysis, you're getting what you're not supposed to get. You have to go back to the data and clean it up. So our test is still significant. The 5 is now named professors, and we can compare the various educational levels, and we can see there's a significant difference between the average income of high school holders and other levels of education. And conventionally, that is expected, right? Yeah, that is expected. Now, interestingly, Let's draw insight from this data. Now, if you compare BSc and high school, there's a different, BSc and MSc, there's a different. Of course, we would expect these differences in a normal economy. Now, let's look at something. MSc and high school, of course, there should be a difference. MSc and BSc, of course, we expect a difference. Now, interestingly, look at this. MSc and PhD, not statistically different. This can be expected, isn't it? Since some master's degree holders can actually earn even up to or higher than PhD holders. And then we also look at MSc and professors. Okay, this one is significantly different. So that's how you interpret your analysis of variance outcome with a post hoc analysis, where you compare the various groupings together and see which one is statistically significant. And sometimes you can also use the confidence intervals to see which one is significant or not. Now, let me just quickly get over this, Now, when you have a statistically significant outcome, it means there is no zero in the interval. If you draw a number line, you're moving from -1 to +1. The center is 0. Confidence levels on the same side of the number line are significant, meaning there is no zero in between. So if I'm moving from -12.01 to 0 to -0.22, I'm not going to have 0 in this interval. So you can see it corresponds to statistical significance. So that's how you interpret your confidence intervals. Any confidence interval with 0 in the interval is not accurate. Now look at this non-significant result. Non-significant, we saw one. Okay, the comparison of MSc and PhD. MSc and PhD, you can, if you trace it, first, the result is not significant. Check the confidence interval. I'm moving from -9.11 to 16.50. If you're moving from -9, before you get to 16, there's 0 in that interval. So this is not significant. So that's how you interpret your confidence interval. So anyone without 0, but then generally, the narrower the confidence interval, the better. The narrower the confidence interval, the better. So that's that on that. The rest is just standard error. And of course, we know standard error. Standard error is actually telling us that it is the deviation of the sample mean from the population. Meaning if you've taken a sample from a population, that population of study is assumed to have a mean. So the difference between the sample mean and the population mean is what we call standard error. Yeah, so but then the central limit theorem, under the central limit theorem, you would expect that in a large enough sample, your sample statistics would converge to your population parameters. We'll cover that in more advanced analysis as the time goes by. But just look at your significance level, your confidence level, and you're good to go at this level. I think we are done with that. That's analysis of variance. Now let's assume that our data is not normally distributed. Let's also assume that the data does not have equal variances. So the assumption of homoscedasticity or homogeneity of variance has been violated, and we cannot run the parametric analysis of variance. Now, a corresponding non-parametric test, when we are comparing more than 2 groups, is what we call Kruskal-Wallis test. Is what we call Kruskal-Wallis test. So if our data is not normal, but we still want to compare more than 2 groups, we run Kruskal-Wallis. If our data is not normal, but we want to compare only 2 groups, we run what we did earlier, the Mann-Whitney-U test. There's another one called Wilcoxon's test, but let's just stick with those 2 for now. So now let's compare more than 2 groups for a non-normal data. You go to analyze, you come to non-parametric, you go to legacy dialogues as we did together previously. Now, the only difference is, remember the first time we chose two independent samples because we were comparing males and females. But now we have more than 2 groups. In that case, you choose K independent samples. So when you click on K independent samples, I want to test the income variable and I want to test it on my educational levels. I have to define my range. It is 1 to 5. So you must know how you group your classification variable. It is 1 to 5. Continue. Now, let's stick with the Kruskal-Wallis test. So make sure that this one is ticked, Kruskal-Wallis. So when you run it, we have a similar outcome, but here we are using ranks because we assume our data is not normally distributed. But you can also see, looking at the significant value of 0.00, it is highly significant. If you compare that to the ANOVA outcome here, for the parametric version, you can see. It means that there's a statistically significant difference when it comes to the average income level across various levels of education. So both the parametric and non-parametric tests are giving us the same output. But it doesn't mean that because they are giving us the same output, then you can use a parametric test for a data set that is not satisfying the assumptions. It is a wrong practice in research. So if your data does not satisfy the required assumption, please look for the non-parametric counterpart. Because you get similar results, you can see. That's that on that. So that is that on comparing 2 groups. Yes?
Okay, so on the last part, how do you interpret the mean lengths?
The what?
The mean lengths. How can you interpret on the Kruskal-Wallis test or when you're looking at the mean length? Yeah, how do you interpret it then?
Now this is ranking. Now, when you compare the ranks, for high school you have 381. But usually we would not run this for a continuous data like this, but let me interpret it this way. If you look at professorship and this, which one has a higher rank when it comes to the income levels? Professorship, right? So if you compare this to this table here, you get the difference here that professors and high schools, look at the mean difference, 75. And then significant, I mean professors, since it's positive, it means professors are likely to earn more on the positive side than high school. So their mean ranking is higher than, their mean income rank is higher than those of high school students. But the problem in this is that you can't draw this conclusion because the numbers are, when you're comparing 460 students from high school and these, it could be a biased comparison. So better to just draw your inference based on, you can see here we are not comparing individually, we are just looking for a statistically significant difference. So you only start looking at pairwise comparisons like the mean ranks if you've run the post hoc test. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Any other question, please?
Another question.
Sorry?
How can just we test the assumption for ANOVA in this case, whether it fulfills the parametric criteria or not?
Okay, that's a very good question. We can do that. That's a very good question. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll do that. I'll demonstrate that soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Any other question, please? I think let's ask all the questions now before we don't have a lot of time now. Any other question, please? Okay.
Hello. Okay.
Let's.
Let me. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Mine is not a question of this. So somebody has
Okay.
asked, is there any way we can get the name of your channel, YouTube channel, so that we can get this? Because actually you're fast, but I don't just want to complain because I'm new to this. So you can just drop the
I think
picture.
it's recorded and then it will be posted.
Thank you.
It will be posted. Yeah, it will be posted. Don't worry about that. You'll receive it. Now, somebody asked a very important question. How do we know that the assumptions have been satisfied? Now, it's easy. Just go to Analyze, Compare Means, One-Way ANOVA. Now, under this, go to Options. Can you see that? Click on Homogeneity of Variance Test. You can also check on the means plot, which gives you the distribution of the residuals. I think, yeah, that should work. So when you check this and you click Continue and you run the test, now look at something. You can see that the first output we have is the test of homogeneity of what? Variances. And how do we interpret it? We did say that what? When the significant level is lower than p-value, it means our data set did not satisfy the assumption for homogeneity of variance. So this is how you get the test in an analysis of variance test. I think I've answered your question, right?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah, so that's how you test it. Then we can also check the mean plot. Now we have some mean plot. Is this the mean plot of residuals? Or no, this is the mean plot of the point. This is not residuals. I don't think this gives you the residual distribution. Let me check. Let me check again. We have other options. It is also a test of robustness. You can use the wedge test also to check. Yeah, I think that's okay. That's okay. So you can use the Levens test to draw that conclusion. Any other question, please? We have less than 13 minutes to go. Any other question?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Please, what's
For
your
the
question?
normality test.
Yeah.
Okay. For the normality test, if the data not normally distributed, you went for K test, right?
Kruskal-Wallis test. If I'm comparing more than two groups.
But I counter one question like, if your data not normally distributed, you do transformation.
You can do that as well.
Between this transformation and K test.
You know, first of all, you must understand the objectives of your study. Now, usually when you're trying to run a regression model, usually an econometrics, right? And your data is not, actually we call it unit root test. Now, and your data is not satisfying the assumptions for an econometric model, such as stationarity of the data, especially when you're dealing with what's it called, panel data. In that case, you transform. There are various forms of transformation. In that case, you transform. But we are only testing for differences here. We are not.
So what if it is a time series?
Yeah, it is time series too. You need to test for the stationarity of your data before you run an econometric model. Yeah. If you're running a regression model, the first assumption you have to satisfy is that the stationarity of your variables.
Right.
Yeah. If it's time series, you have to do the same. If not, whatever output you're getting is not reliable. That's why at the beginning I said this training is for beginners to intermediate. You know, we are not going to those advanced levels yet. I think those would have been covered during the Stata training program. I think so. Yeah. But that was handled some weeks back or months back.
Also have a question.
Sorry? Okay, your question, please. Hello?
Okay. You talk about the homogeneity. Hello, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hello.
I can hear you, please. Please continue.
Okay, you talk about the homogeneity tests, and
yeah,
can we consider because there are situations whereby you analyze data and it's brought about collinearity issue or something. Those are result of what's it called? Collinearity can be linked. Do we have any relationship between homogeneity test and collinearity output? Like, can it be a cause for that? So that's the first question. The second question is having a higher percentage of standard of error in the ANOVA table, does it really have implication on the output of the data?
Sorry, I didn't get your second question correctly. Can you repeat that again? Hello?
Having a higher percentage of standard of error in the ANOVA table. Hello, can you hear me?
Standard. Oh, you're talking about the standard error?
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Hello?
Yeah, in the ANOVA table.
Mm-hmm.
In the ANOVA table. So does it have implication on the output of the data?
You know, it depends on the test you're running. You know, in this, what we are doing here, because, you know, I don't want us to like bring other forms of analysis into what we are doing. Do you understand me? Now, I only gave a definition of what standard error is. And I said standard error is simply the variation between the sample mean and the population mean. Standard error in this context, that's what I'm talking about. I don't want us to take the conversation out of the context of this training. Some of our questions are delving into other areas, and I would like us to focus on this area. Because if you look at the ANOVA table here, there's no standard error here, right? So if you want us to talk about that, we can talk about it in private, but I don't want us to deviate from the essence of this training. So you can feel free to ask me or Dr. Kwame or any other one who will be of help. Let's address that outside this training. Any other question, please? Okay. So in the absence of any other question, you know, because when we are using Stata to run analysis and other things, there are other considerations. There are other, that's you're moving a bit higher, and I want to keep this training as friendly as possible to those who are new to data analysis. That's why I'm not trying to deviate from the essence of this training. Any other question, please? Okay. If there is no any other question, let's quickly browse over this for the remaining minute. We were looking at something similar, but this looks a little bit complicated. Let's look at this.
Sorry.
Let me explain this. I gave the platform for questions. So let me explain this, then you can ask your question. Yeah. Remember last week I said this training is for beginners to intermediate level. So if you have more advanced questions, I may not be able to answer you during this training. So your questions should be relevant and directed to what we are covering in this training section, because we only have 2 hours, so we can't deviate to other things. Now, choosing a statistical test. I explained this earlier. Categorical and then variable. So predictor variable, independent variable, they are the same thing. Don't get it twisted. So the outcome variable is also known as your response variable. Your outcome variable is also known as your response variable. So if we have a categorical independent variable, and then we have an outcome variable that is categorical, what do? You choose a non-parametric test.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a predictor variable, that is an independent variable that is categorical, and then your outcome variable, that is your dependent variable, is also categorical, you choose a non-parametric test, because both the independent variable and then the dependent variable, they are not quantitative, they are categorical data. So your mind should be on what type of non-parametric test. I think it's there on the screen. I'm only reading what is on the screen. I explained before, predictor variable means independent variable. And we have 2 sides to the predictor variable. The left-hand side is categorical. And I explain what categorical variables means in our measurement scale.
Yes.
If the predictor variable, that's my independent variable, is categorical. And then my outcome variable is also categorical. Then I should look for a non-parametric test because I'm dealing with categorical. But if my predictor variable is categorical, in this case, we did something similar. Like, let me say my independent variable is gender, while the dependent variable was income. In that case, my response variable, which is income, is quantitative. Please let me take that again. If my independent variable is categorical, for instance, gender is categorical, but my response variable, for instance, income is quantitative, then I choose a comparison of means test, which we did. Now, the next question is, how many groups am I comparing? Am I comparing only 2 groups? If it's 2, you run a t-test. If it's more than 2, you have a question to answer. Do I have only one outcome variable? Like what we did before when we were running the analysis of variance test. Our outcome variable was income. So that's one outcome variable. If you have only one outcome variable, then you run what? Analysis of variance. But in most advanced analysis, you are going to have more than one outcome variable. Let's say now I'm looking at income, and let me mention another variable. Let me say tax payment. If I have more than one outcome variable, then I look at what we call MANOVA, multivariate analysis of variance. That's for the left side of this table. First of all, when you have data set, ask yourself the question, what is your predictor variable? The predictor variable means your independent variable. List it down. Is it categorical or quantitative? If it's categorical, move towards the left side of this chart. Then you ask yourself again, what is the outcome variable? The outcome variable is the response variable or the dependent variable. They are the same. Outcome variable, response variable, dependent variable. They are the same terms. If you're doing structural equation model, they may call it endogenous latent variable. They are all response variables. Now, if my outcome variable is categorical, that means it is non-quantitative. I choose a non-parametric test. If it's quantitative, you go the way I've explained here. That's for the left-hand side. Now, for the right-hand side, if my predictor variable or my independent variable is quantitative, then I ask myself, what is the response variable or the dependent variable? Is it categorical? If it's categorical, then I choose logistics regression. But if it's not categorical, then how many predictor variables do I have? Meaning, how many independent variables do I have? Is it 1? Is it more than 1? If it's 1, I run a simple regression analysis. But in most instances at the advanced level of education, we barely use simple regression. So we always focus on multiple regression analysis. So this is just a guide on how to choose statistical analysis with when we are running our test. Any other question? Our time is up. So any other question?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I have a question and I will use my previous work as an example.
Okay.
Previously, we designed an experiment to test the difference between two different feeds on the same animal.
2 different feeds on the same animal?
Yes. Yes, 2 different feeds.
Can we? Okay, go ahead. If it's not going to take time because our time is up. So
yeah, it will be very, very quick. So because it's like we have 2 variables and it's like a simple experiment, I decided to use t-test. But when I used t-test and submitted the But the problem is this, the data has been repeatedly taken in different days.
Okay.
So the person suggested that instead of using a t-test, since the data is a qualitative data and we're going to compare between means, let's use repeated measured ANOVA.
But you have only two groups.
Yeah, we have only two groups, the treated group and the control group. But then the samples were measured about 4 times.
So it's repeated measures, yeah.
Yes, repeated measures. So, but when we used repeated measures, we found out that there was no significant difference at all. And then lately he suggested that, okay, let's come back and use the t-test. So my question is, what's the best statistical test to use? And then secondly, when we design an experiment like this and someone is saying that we expect a difference and then there is no difference, then what do we do? And thirdly, although it's not part of this, but I know you can answer it. When we design an experiment like that and we have no significant difference at all, is it like can we publish such result and say, yeah, we can find significant difference? And to me, I think it's okay so that people will not spend their money or waste resources on going for A while B is cheaper, since there is no significant difference.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to pick your question from the very last one because that one is of general essence to everybody, you know. Then we'll talk about the specifics on the types of analysis to run later on your work. And you may have to add me because this meeting is officially over by 5. So, but then there's this obsession with having a statistically significant difference, you know. I was discussing this with a friend the other time. What you have in your data set, provided that your methodology has been well designed, your data collection instrument is tested, is piloted, and the measurement scale is based on previous studies, and you've collected reliable data, and you're having non-significant results. The ethical thing to do as a researcher is to justify why such outcomes are possible. Take, for instance, somebody conducted a study on blogging in the US and concluded that there's a statistically significant increase in income levels of bloggers. Then somebody is replicating that study in my village where people barely use phones, and then the person is having a non-significant result. That is expected. So sometimes the population of study, cultural differences, economic differences could have impact on the outcome of a study, even if you're replicating the same variables, the same methodology. So the logical thing to do is to look for literature, or to, as a researcher, you're supposed to come up with, to give us a logical reason why such output could be reasonably obtained. That's what I recommend, actually. But I've seen people who want to have significant result by all means. So for me, if you're looking for a significant result, why are you conducting this study? Just conclude that the result is significant. Right? So I always recommend that if you've collected your data properly, just justify your results using existing literature, and that's what I would recommend. But we're a team of researchers and everyone is welcome to contribute to this, please. The floor is open.
Thank you so much.
Okay. I have a question.
Okay.
How do we design an experiment using SPSS?
You can't design an experiment using SPS if you, I don't know your major, but in statistical theory, there's this course called Design and Analysis of Experiments. So you would have to design your experiment, collect the data, and you analyze with SPSS. So you can't, unless of course there's a feature in SPSS that designs experiments. I've not used it before. Yeah. Because everything is possible.
All right,
Maybe, yeah. Any other question?
Everything is possible. Is it possible to do it in SPSS?
How do you design an experiment in a software? What is an experiment? That's the first thing you ask yourself. We are analyzing the data from your experiment. We are not designing the experiment in the software.
Okay.
So what we have here is we are analyzing data. You have to design your experiment, collect the data, then you bring the data into your software to analyze.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay. So how do we get the slides and the recordings of this session?
Dr. Kwame usually posts them on a YouTube channel, and I think OAAD also has a YouTube channel. So I think the links to the recordings will be made available as soon as this study is concluded.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Can I ask a question, please?
I have one question, sorry.
The last
Okay.
one.
Your question, please.
Okay, slide number 12 regarding the parametric and the non-parametric data. Yes. How can just we differentiate them? This is a parametric, this is non-parametric.
You mean how can you differentiate which one to use?
Yes, even to say this data is parametric, this is non-parametric. What the criteria?
Oh, the criteria is that before you apply a parametric analysis procedure, you expect your data to conform to some requirements, such as 1, normality of the data set, 2, homogeneity of variances, which is also called homoscedasticity?
Yeah.
But yeah, so you expect your data to satisfy these conditions. So normally, like traditionally, you could use Excel to plot histogram and just look at, or you can do some descriptives. That's why you run descriptive analysis. You can plot a histogram, then you put the normal distribution curve on it, and you see if it's normally distributed, or is it having a long tail, which is skewness of the data. So you examine all these things before you decide if you're running a parametric or non-parametric test. That is the essence of descriptive analysis, to explore the data. Then you decide on what is suitable for the data.
Okay, thank you very much.
And thank you for bringing, please, let me quickly say something. Thank you for bringing me back to this slide. Please, for those who need more information on how to select a statistical test, I recommend this site. You know, it has a table, a series of tables explaining when to apply which test. I think it would be beneficial for most of us. So please, if you need more information on choosing your test, please visit this site. So please, madam, ask your question, please. That's the last question I'm going to take because I've eaten 10 minutes of our time.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. These slides with us.
Sure. I'm going to share it in the group. But
let me continue.
Your question, please. Yeah.
Okay, my question is, is it possible to run an analysis of a data with mediation and moderating variable with SPSS?
Yes, there's Amos. SPSS directly will not do that, but there's on the SPSS interface, there is actually a place where you do that. But I think Amos is usually a paid software extensions. If you click on these extensions, I think you go to install or something, you add Amos to it. Is it Amos or Amos? Yeah. Do you understand me? You can't run mediation analysis directly from SPSS. You would have to add the Amos extension to it. AMOS. Yeah. So you can't run it in SPSS.
So is there any possibility to get the training on Amos in the future?
If you're running a mediation analysis, I think the easiest software I would like to recommend is for you to look up what's it called? Smart PLS. It's more, I think it's easier for you to learn, especially if you're out of time, and because we did structural equation modeling recently and we use Smart PLS. So you can consult the videos on the YouTube channel. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor.
You're welcome. I think I would like us to close for today. Thank you all for attending. And if you have any question, you can post in the same group and we'll all contribute to helping you provide satisfactory answers to them. Thank you so much for coming. See you next week. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See you next week.
I'll see you. Bye.